Welcome to the Jerry Reynolds Show from the McCreary's studio and the home of McCreary's Furnishings, the finest in Sacramento. And boy, am I really thrilled to have not just a friend, but a great guest, well known to all you Sacramento Kings sports fans or sports fans just about everywhere in America, Mr. Grant Napear. And Grant, it's just great to you spend the time here.
Well, I got to tell you, this is a flashback to 1980 and 89 when we had the Jerry Reynolds Show at the Channel 31 studios. You and I used to go in and do a half-hour TV show every week.
I hope this ends up better than that one. But Grant was the host, and I was coaching at that time, and I think, we had about a year, wasn't it? The legendary Jerry Reynolds Show, but it's a lot of fun.
Remember when we had Larry Bird come to the studio that day? We literally had people lined up on the driveway, and which was fascinating to us because I don't know how anyone ever found that out.
Yeah, that was amazing, And I mean, of course, obviously when you have these great stars, it's amazing. Everybody seems to know, but it's so nice and always appreciated Larry doing that, obviously. Like, especially since our pay was zero.
That was something. Seriously, Larry Bird came to the studio that day and did a half hour with us. And, that was in Larry's heyday. Larry Bird was in the Channel 31 studios, and all the people that worked at the station were trying to come in to, meet Larry. It was great. It was fascinating to have him in the studio, but we really had a lot of fun doing that show. It was a low production show.
Oh, yeah.
And we look back on it now and we're like, wow, I can't believe that we put ourselves in that type of an environment. But it was great.
It was interesting too, because I think later that evening, he came out the house and of course we had a few beers, or actually a whole lot of beers.
Right.
And then the next night he goes out and just kicks my
Kills
butt.
us.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, that's the way that kind of goes. But the first question I got to ask you, I was looking at Wikipedia and trying to get some info. Your middle initial is O, and does that stand for Orwell?
My middle initial is H. Don't believe anything you read on Wikipedia. My middle name is Harrington, named after the minister of my parents' church.
Oh.
And so my middle name is Harrington. I don't know where the O came from.
Oh, okay.
So maybe it's for oh boy.
Oh boy. Well, yeah, that could be. But I was going to say, I just wondered about it. I saw that, and it didn't make a lot of sense. And now that you mentioned your parents. I was lucky enough to get to spend time with your father.
Sure.
And really enjoyed him, and such a great sports fan. And I know going back to your childhood, obviously that had a real impact on you growing up,
Oh, gosh. Growing up as a kid on Long Island, my dad had season tickets for both the Giants and the Jets. And really at the age of 3, my dad took me to my first ever NFL game at Yankee Stadium to watch the Giants play, because they played at Yankee Stadium for all those years before they moved into the New Meadowlands back in 76. But so I started going to NFL games when I was 3 years old. And then literally every single Sunday growing up, without fail, I was at an NFL game. I was either at Yankee Stadium watching the Giants or Shea Stadium watching Joe Namath and the Jets. And I loved the Giants and still do to this day, as you know.
I know.
And hated the Jets, and I still do to this day. And it was funny because all of the fans at Shea Stadium used to kid my dad, why are you bringing him to these games? Because 1 week I'd be rooting for the Patriots, 2 weeks later I'd be rooting for the Colts, then I'd be rooting for the Bills, because the Jets fans are like, who is this punk?
Yeah, hey, Mr. Napear, leave that little prick home.
But, the Giants were my dad's favorite team, and so growing up, it was fascinating. And our church was in Manhattan, which took an hour to get there. But I remember as a kid always being pulled out of Sunday school early because we had to get on the subway to go to either Shea Stadium or to Yankee Stadium to go to an NFL game. And then in the winter months, my dad would very often take us to a Rangers game, a matinee, because the Rangers always played, it seemed like, on Sunday afternoons. So we'd go to a lot of hockey games. You know, growing up as a kid, Jerry, you couldn't get tickets to see the Knicks. They were too good.
Well, I was going to say that was the time when the Knicks were obviously
couldn't get tickets.
You know, just
you couldn't get in.
Obviously, you know, I like to say both of us. That's one thing about being old. We could remember the Knicks when they were truly great.
Yeah. So I mean, we were literally, as a kid, I was at a game all the time. In addition to playing all kinds of sports, and my dad never missed one of my games. He had his own business. He was an insurance broker in New York City, and I'll never forget playing. You know, even in junior high school and high school, you know, games would start right at 4:00. And at 3:55, there would be my dad walking across the field in a suit, just getting off the Long Island Railroad. And I really mean this. I don't ever remember playing a game in either junior high school or high school without my dad in attendance. Home, away, whether I was playing high school football or high school lacrosse, which was I really good at, my dad was at every single game as growing up.
Yeah.
Never missed a game.
Yeah, I think my pretty much had the same experience, you know, even my dad, when he could. I mean, there's some work-related things where he couldn't get off, you know, as a laborer and that sort of thing, but he'd always be there. My mom would always say he'd always go sit on the visitor side and, you know, and then try to say, well, boy, that guy don't you think he's pretty good? You know what I mean? But he'd never tell me, you know, he'd always, after games, he'd say, well, boy, yeah, he'd always praise all the other guys, you know, but that's, you know, that was.
Yeah. But, you know, again, growing up outside of New York, and we lived really in an area where you wouldn't know New York City was anywhere near there. I mean, you know, we were very suburban.
Yeah, Syosset,
New York, you know, with beautiful trees and lots of land. And, I mean, where I lived, we didn't have a lot of land. It was a half-acre lot. But the point is, it was great because you were far enough away from the city where you didn't know the city was there, and yet you were close enough where you could be in the city within an hour.
Yeah.
And with that comes all of your sports and all your, you know, every sport. We used to go to the Milrose games, which was the track and field event every year at Madison Square Garden. I mean, we were at everything. We were at everything.
Yeah, I always remember some trips to Long Island. I recruited Footsie Walker from Southampton.
How about that, huh?
Yeah,
not a bad area to go to.
Yeah, a beautiful area. Yeah. You know, now Footsie wasn't in one of the exclusive parts of it, but yeah, that, and then I always remember going to Long Island Lutheran several times.
Oh, sure.
To recruit
Bill
guys.
Wennington went there.
Yeah, you know, they always had some top players.
That was 5 minutes from where I grew up.
Yeah.
So you get an idea of where I grew up.
Yeah, no, beautiful.
Right.
I thought it was a great area.
Yes.
You know, really, and I mean, like you say, I didn't. At that time, the city scared me still, you know. I mean, it took me about 10, it took me 10 years in the NBA before I ever
from
left
French
the hotel.
Lick, trying to survive in New York City.
I was. I mean, I won't deny that. You know, I swear I was probably in the league 10 years before I had any comfort zone getting out of the hotels and stuff. I just assumed I'd get mugged. But as you know, too, the last 20 years, I just enjoyed the heck out of it. You
Absolutely.
know, I couldn't wait to get to New York. I just love to walk there, the different neighborhoods.
That's great.
I mean, you know, as you know, it's always, you want a sandwich at 2:00 in the morning.
You can get it. You don't have to walk far.
You don't have to walk far. Out your door and turn left. There it is. You know, that type stuff. But now, when you were in high school, did you play any other sports besides? I know you got a lacrosse scholarship and you're very good there. Did you play other sports?
Yeah, I played football. I was starting defensive lineman, high school football. And I stopped playing basketball in 9th grade because I wanted to concentrate more on lacrosse because it was my best sport, but I didn't want to give up football. So played high school football and high school lacrosse. And just, you know, I reflect back to those days. I think everyone would say they had a great time in high school. It was great. We had really good teams, but just the participation. And my dad always brought up, because you play sports because you want to have fun, not because you want to make a ton of money and you want to do this. I was fortunate enough to get a lacrosse scholarship, but I was never brought up on the way I think a lot of our kids are being brought up today, where you have to choose one sport, and these parents have this illusions of grandeur that you're going to be professional athletes and make all that money. My dad always said, hey, you're playing because it's fun to play. And you're not going to be a professional athlete, and you're playing because it's fun to play sports and the enjoyment of sports. It was never stressed on me for any other reason that we were playing sports. And I think, unfortunately, there are too many youth now that have the wrong they're being taught false. And I'm not saying don't chase your dreams.
Sure.
But you know this.
Yeah.
I mean, very, 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 very few of our athletes that we see on the high school field ever go on to play Division I college, and even less than that go on to play in the pros.
Yeah, and there's so many of the great stars have been late developers, weren't even outstanding until late in their high school career or even in high school.
Hey, I'll tell you this story. I was fortunate enough 2 years ago to be at a friend's birthday party, and he put me and my wife at a table with Roger Staubach and Roger Staubach's wife. And in Roger Staubach, who, of course, everyone knows, one of the great quarterbacks to ever play, Hall of Fame, went to the Naval Academy, served our country. But I got talking to Roger Staubach, and I asked Roger, we were there for 3 or 4 hours, so we had a lot of things to talk about. And I said, I'm just curious, Roger, when you were playing for the Cowboys, was it a big deal to go play at Yankee Stadium? And he said, oh, for me, it was a great deal because baseball was my first love. And he said, I played baseball at the Naval Academy too. And he said, I didn't even start playing football until, I think he said, his junior year in high school. And I just thought that was fascinating that, Roger Staubach, his first love was baseball, and yet he picked up football at that late stage in his career. I mean, even on the Kings, Dwayne Dedman didn't start playing basketball really until he was late in high school because his mother would not allow him because of their religious beliefs. And you hear stories about that all the time. It bothers me, and it really does bother me, that our children are almost being forced to choose a sport to play year-round at such an early age.
Yeah, at junior high school or something like that, 13, 14, they're told you got to pick a sport.
Travel teams.
And I was like say, so many guys, I always remember Tim Duncan really was a swimmer until like his senior year in high school, was recruited kind of on a whim by Wake Forest, and of course the rest is history.
Yeah.
That sort of thing Hakeem Olajuwon really just started playing basketball when he got to Houston, I think, pretty much, other than being a 7-footer. And, but I always say too, I think just pretty much most of the professional athletes would tell you that, it really helps to play a lot of sports.
Absolutely.
I still think one of the things that I'm most proud of is I still have the record that they told me in Springs Valley High School for 12 varsity letters.
Wow, and that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I always tell Bird, and he said, "Well, it's probably easy to get them back then." But I said, "Well, it was."
That's pretty impressive.
But I mean, but the idea was you just, like you said, you just played. Baseball season came, you played.
Yeah.
Track, you played. I mean, now I always certainly played basketball kind of year round because it was Indiana.
Sure, of course.
You'd play baseball and then maybe in the evening go to the courts and play basketball.
It's also now there's more technology in our data and our science saying that, our young youth that play the same sport all year round are more susceptible to certain injuries because when you play different sports, you're using different muscles and different movements with your body. And look at all of the young injuries that we're seeing even in the NBA.
I agree.
And we're now seeing the generation that's coming into the NBA have been playing year-round basketball for a long time. The AAU, the travel circuits, and now they're saying, gee, there's a correlation between our young athletes starting to break down and getting these serious injuries and playing a certain sport year-round. And I got to tell you, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Well, it does to me, too. I really think, and then I think you see even the burnout part of it.
Yeah.
I always remember, and Billy Owens was a great high school player, the number one high school player, and kind of pushed, I think, by a really demanding father and a really nice young man.
Yep.
I mean, but he never had the career he should have. He just didn't really. I mean, for one of a better term, I always thought he was just kind of I've had enough. I'm playing it.
Yeah, he didn't have the drive that you would expect. I mean, if you would, the saying is, boy, if you could take this guy's head and put it on this guy's body, you would have the greatest player of all time.
Yeah.
If you could have taken any number of players that you coached back then and put their drive and their desire into Billy Owens, you would have had one of the great players of his generation.
No, he really. Right. That's exactly right. I mean, how do you? But that's the way it is in probably every profession. You just, you like every player to. Like today, like to play as hard as Rashawn Holmes, but
it doesn't happen.
The Creator doesn't make a lot of them. That's the old Bill Russell statement. When I worked for him, and he'd always say, "Well, God just makes 4 or 5 like us every decade or two." So now Now, when say during your high school career and all, when did you start, or in high school, did you start thinking about radio, TV as a career?
I started thinking of radio and TV when I was really in second or third grade, believe it or not. First of all, I got into this business because I got absolutely infatuated by listening to Marv Albert do the Rangers and the Knicks on radio. Mm-hmm. And it would be where I would listen to those games all the time. And really on the playground at Split Rock School, when I was in second, third, fourth grade, I lived right around the corner from the school. So at lunchtime, I was allowed to leave and go home for lunch, but the kids that took the bus had to stay there, obviously. Mm-hmm. And so I would run home and I would make a grilled cheese sandwich real quick, and I'd run back and reserve the basketball court outside so that when the bell rung for the kids to get out of lunch, we had the court, and I would literally announce the game and play it at the same time.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, I would literally play and announce at the same time. And it evolved to a point where when I went to junior high school, whenever we had a class assembly that ran early, before the bell rung, you had to sit there in the big assembly room, and the students would all start chanting my name. And I would have to literally walk up on the stage and do a mock play-by-play of a Rangers or a Knicks game.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. And I would literally add commercials. Uh-huh. I mean, I would literally be doing the games and go, timeout Knicks, and now this from Ford. And I would do a Ford commercial. And I did that. And then fortunately, my high school had a radio station that was run by the students. But I couldn't do that much because I was playing football and playing lacrosse. But I did a little bit. But I always tell students, and if there's anyone that's watching this that wants to be in broadcasting, you know, the great thing about what I do, you don't have to have a job to practice. And I used to practice all the time on my own. Mm-hmm. And again, we grew up in an era with no internet and very few options on TV. As a matter of fact, when I was growing up, a lot of times the Knicks weren't even on live TV. You'd have to watch it on tape delay. The NBA Finals weren't even shown live.
Right, yeah.
So I used to turn the volume down on the TV, or I would sit in my room and make believe I was on TV, and I'd have a camera in front of me. I'd make believe there was a camera in front of me, and I would just try to talk about a story. So let's say I wanted to talk about last night's Knicks game. Mm-hmm. I would, in my mind, get 3 or 4 points. I would make believe there was a camera in my room, and I would try to just do a sportscast in my room. So I was practicing, because it's really incredible how everyone gets their start in this business. And before you even ask me, I'll just lead you into that. I was blessed to go to Bowling Green to play lacrosse, but they had a really good, and I didn't even know, when I was recruited for lacrosse, I'll never forget this. I went out my senior year in high school, and I was out there in February. And Bowling Green, without me even knowing it, had a Division I powerhouse hockey team. And you know how much I love hockey.
Oh, I know, yeah.
And they were playing Ohio State in hockey on Friday and Saturday night. And I was put up at a fraternity house with all the lacrosse players for my visit there, which wasn't bad, by the way. And we went to the hockey game on both Friday and Saturday night. And half the players on that team ended up playing in the National Hockey League. But before I got on the plane to fly back to New York, I had already made my decision that that's where I was going to go to school. I had such a great time and just loved everything about it. And there was no pro lacrosse, and I knew I could go there and play as a freshman. And, you know, we were actually pretty good. But in terms of what they had with radio, it was great for me because I went and got really involved in the campus station my freshman year. And because I had so much experience, I was able to start doing some Division I football and Division I basketball. And then my junior year, I was able to get an internship at the station that was a commercial station in town that did all the hockey, all the basketball, and the football at Bowling Green, but they weren't the official station for football, but they still did it. So my junior year, they gave me my own sports show to produce twice a week, 15 minutes. I would edit it. I would, you know, what's like today with digital, you'd get a little razor blade and you'd have the audio tape and you would put it in this little thing and you'd splice it. You'd get a little piece of Scotch tape, and that's how you would edit the 15-minute program that I did. Uh-huh. And it was very time consuming. But I also did a lot of the Bowling Green hockey back then. And I'll never forget, we'd get on the bus on Thursday and we would drive 10 hours, let's say, to northern Michigan, the Upper Peninsula. Mm-hmm. And, you know, before you go, I'd have to make sure that all the equipment that I needed, you know, you had to check and double check, because once you're up there, what's in your little case is what you're going to have to work with. Right. So I would double check. The last thing you want to do is get up to do a broadcast and not have the right equipment. And so I would literally go up to the arena, set up all my equipment, and then I would be a one-man band. I would do the play-by-play. I would do the interviews in between the periods that I would record ahead of time. So I might interview one of the star players or the coach. I would do the whole pregame show. I would do the first, second, third period, all of the in-between period stuff, and then the postgame show. And I would do that on Friday and Saturday night. And so I got great experience in college doing hockey. And really, I don't even think I've ever said this before. My dream coming out of college was to be a pro hockey announcer. I didn't even think about doing basketball, although I used to do a lot of basketball. My first love, and you know how much I love hockey.
Oh, yeah. No, I was going to say, that doesn't surprise me a lot, really.
Yeah. And I always tell students this as well. Don't ever limit yourself. If you want to be a baseball announcer, that's great. But if someone comes by and says, hey, they need someone to announce your football or basketball, you better be able to jump on that.
Well, don't you think, I mean, as a professional in your field, I mean, you have to have
you really do.
The ability to maintain.
Well, I've been blessed because, as you know, I did the Raiders on TV for 5 years in the preseason. Back in the mid-'90s, I filled in for Randy Hahn doing Sharks games, so I fulfilled my dream. I've done NHL games during the regular season. But, we always talk about, okay, you have to be prepared when you get your opportunity in this business, and it does help to know people. And my dad's mixed doubles tennis partner that they played in this outdoor club every summer in New York, his name was Vic Piano. And my dad's mixed doubles partner was his wife. And he owned what they call the Mislu Sports Network, which was really basically ESPN before ESPN became what it is. And they did a lot of the bowl games, a lot of the college football games. And after my senior year in high school, I was working still in Bowling Green. And Vic Piano had always said to my dad, hey, if there's anything we can do for Grant, let me know. Make a long story short, Bowling Green made it to the California Bowl. And Mislu is doing the game. So I call up Mr. Piano, and he gives me the name of Bill Schwing, the executive producer. Now, I was doing Bowling Green football, but as I said, we weren't the official station. We were not allowed to do the California Bowl on radio because the official station could do it. You couldn't do it both. So anyway, I call Bill Schwing. Never forget the conversation. I go, Mr. Schwing, hi, my name is Grant Napear. I was given your number by Mr. Piano. And he said, yeah, what can I do for you? And I explained that, I with Bowling Green, doing the games, they're going to be in the California Bowl. And he said, okay, well, we're having a production meeting at this hotel at 6 o'clock on Friday. Just come to the production meeting. So thank goodness for my dad. He paid for my airline ticket to go to California. I had never been to California. Flew through San Francisco into Fresno. And so anyway, I show up to this meeting on a Friday night. And there's probably 10 people in there. And I'm just sitting down. No one even asked me who I was or anything. I'm just sitting there and I'm listening to everything. So we get done with the meeting. And Bill Schwing goes, now, I'm sorry, who are you again? And I said, I'm Grant Napear. He goes, oh, yeah, I talked to you on the phone. He goes, so what is it that you want to do? I said, well, I just, anything that you might need. And he said, well, he goes, this is national TV. I can't just let anybody on TV, but I do need someone to do the halftime. He said, how about you come to the stadium 3 hours tomorrow before the game, and I'll give you an audition. And if the audition works out, you can do the halftime show. I go, great. And I said, I completely understand. I said, I understand how it works. If I'm not good enough, no problem. I understand. So I get to the stadium 3 hours before the game starts, and they had all these technical problems, and I couldn't do an audition. So now I'm in the TV booth, hanging out in the back. First quarter begins. Second quarter begins. And I said to the stage manager, I said, hey, can you ask Bill for me if I'm going to be doing the halftime or not? Because I'd like to prepare something. 4 minutes left to go in the first half. She goes, okay. Bill said you're doing the halftime.
Oh, geez.
Okay?
Yeah.
And she says, you're going to interview the commissioner of the conference, and you're going to do some stats and highlights. Now, I've never been on TV before. This is national TV. Never been on TV before. But all my life, I've been practicing as if I were on TV. Now, was I nervous? Yeah, of course I was nervous. But I wasn't nervous because I thought I might fail. I was just nervous with butterflies, probably like you were coaching big games.
Sure.
You get the adrenaline, but not because you aren't prepared. Now, you might get beat, but you're prepared. You might get beat because you lost to a better team, but it's not for lack of preparation.
Right.
And I kid you not, I'm sitting there in Fresno, California, at the California Bowl, and I did the interview. We go to commercial. I come back, I do a couple of highlights, and I felt like it went well. So after the game, when I'm walking out of the stadium, I'm happen to be walking by the TV truck, and Bill Schwing just happens to come out, and he goes, Grant! He goes, oh, my God. And he goes, you have no idea how nervous we were all in that truck, but you did a great job, and we wish you the best of luck, and blah, blah, blah. So I get back to Bowling Green, and about 3 or 4 months later, I run into a sports director at the ABC TV station in Toledo, who I used to see all the time because Bowling Green and Toledo, as you know, it's 20 minutes apart. Yeah. And he comes up to me and he goes, I didn't know you did TV. I said, I didn't know I did TV either. And he said, well, listen, I got 6 weeks vacation this summer, and our weekend guy is filling in for me, and we need someone to fill in on the weekends. Would you be interested in coming up and doing an audition? I said, yeah, I would love to. I'll never forget it because it was my birthday. It was June 18th, 1983. And I went up to the TV station, and the news director meets me, and he goes, okay, he goes, just write a couple of scripts, and then I'll meet you in the studio. Well, I don't write anything. You know me.
Yeah.
I don't ever have anything written down. All my commercials, everything I ad lib. And I'm like, wow, okay. So I write some scripts. He walks me into the studio, and I'm overwhelmed. You know, there's all these cameras and lights, and I'm in a real live TV studio. And he goes, okay, here's the teleprompter. And he goes, you operate the teleprompter with a foot pedal right down. It's like a sewing machine. And I'm like, oh, my God. Now I'm so nervous. I don't normally read off scripts. And so I do the audition, and the news director goes, would you like to do it again? And I said, well, you don't get a chance to do it again when you're live on TV, do you? And he said, no. And so I get a call 3 days later. They said, hey, you're good. We'd like you to fill in on the weekends. $5 an hour. I'm like, perfect. I don't need any money, you know? Mm-hmm. But then I had been working in Bowling Green at this radio station after I graduated, and the station was sold, and it became a Spanish format. So right during this time, I moved back to Long Island because I didn't have a job. And Mike Regai, who was the weekend sports anchor, would call me up sometimes on Thursday night and would go, hey, you know, I'm taking the weekend off. Can you work this weekend? I'd say, yeah. And I'd get in my car and I'd drive 10 hours, stay at my buddy's house on Bowling Green, do a 5-minute sportscast on Saturday, a 5-minute sportscast on Sunday, and drive home.
And drive 10 hours home.
Yep, for $5 an hour. And I did that for about...
Now, kids out there, those of you that want to do play-by-play, do sports broadcasting, think about that.
It was great. And you learn how to work the TV camera, so I would go out and shoot all the highlights. I'd be at the Toledo Mud Hens game. And it was fascinating because when I was in Toledo, that team in Toledo went on to win the World Series with the Twins. Kirby Puckett was on the team, Gary Gaetti, Tim Tuffle, the whole team. And, you know, they were the AAA of the Twins, and they went on to win the World Series. So, but one of the neatest things that ever happened to me was I went up to Tiger Stadium, and this time I brought a photographer with me. And the Tigers had gotten off to this great start of 35-5, and they were on Sunday, the Sunday game of the week. And I'll never forget it. We go up to Tiger Stadium, and I walk in with my cameraman at the end of the game to get some interviews, and I walk by Sparky Anderson's office, and it's just packed. I couldn't even get in there. So I go and I get an interview with Alan Trammell. I get an interview with Lance Parrish, a couple of the players on the Tigers, but I really need to get Sparky. So then when I get done with those interviews, I walk by and nobody's in Sparky Anderson's office. And I knock on the door and I go, Sparky, would it be possible to get a quick word? He goes, hey, come on in. And he goes, I don't ever recall seeing you before. I said, well, you know, I'm just working part-time. I went to college in Bowling Green, and he goes, listen, just sit down. He goes, and he didn't have a shirt on. Mm-hmm. He said, would you like me to put a shirt on? I go, no, it's okay. My cameraman will shoot you from the neck up. He goes, no, let me put a shirt on. And so I did the interview with Sparky, and I kid you not, he sat me down for 10 minutes and was asking me questions about where I was from. You know, this is like manager of the Tigers that's off to a 35-5 start. They just did all of these interviews with all of these people. It was on the game of the week. Joe Garagiola and Tony Kubek were doing the game. You know, and I'm like, I couldn't believe how kind he was. And so I had some fascinating experiences when I was working to get my resume tape up. Mm-hmm. And then and again, if I'm running on and on, tell me to shut up. But I was living that summer, the next summer, with George McPhee, who won the Hobie Baker Award, which is the equivalent of the Heisman in college hockey. And George was, to this day, one of my best friends. He went and played with the Rangers, which, you know, for me, right out of college. And then he became the general manager of the Washington Capitals, and now he's the general manager of the Vegas Knights. But George and I lived in the summer, and I would help him train while I was trying to get a full-time job. And George came in one afternoon, and I had these Kroger grocery bags with all my clothes in them. He goes, Napes, what's going on? I said, I just got a job. I'm leaving. And I literally did. I had sent all my tapes out.
Now, was this in Decatur?
Yeah,
when
in
you
Decatur.
Went to Decatur, Illinois?
I'll never forget. Dick Westbrook gave me a call, and I didn't even tell George about this. He gave me a call, and I called him because I used to send 30 or 40 tapes out every 2 or 3 months, and then I would follow up with a phone call. And I called WA&D in Decatur. It was on my list. The receptionist, I said, yes, Dick Westbrook, please. And he says, Dick Westbrook here. I said, Mr. Westbrook, my name is Grant Napear. And he goes, oh, yeah. He goes, I just saw your tape this morning. I literally just had my sports guy resign. He goes, I like your work. Can you come out for an interview? It was like a 5-hour drive. I went out for an interview. I came back. And then literally they called me 3 or 4 days later and offered me the job over the phone. And that's when I packed. I had nothing. I had my little Subaru hatchback, and I had literally, I'm not kidding you, all my belongings in little grocery bags. And George comes back and he goes, Napes, what are you doing? I go, George, man, I'm leaving, man. I just got a job. And I literally hung out with George for like 2 hours and got in my car and started my life in Decatur, Illinois.
Now, let me ask you, when you first got to Decatur, what was your first impression? Obviously, you've never really been that far.
No.
I've been there. So.
You know the saying, it's not the end of the world, but you can see it from there?
Yeah.
Decatur was the town you could see.
Yeah, no, I've been.
But you know what was amazing? When I got that job, the salary was $12,300 a year, and it wasn't a full-time sports position. It was anchoring the sports on the weekend, and during the week, I had to be a news photographer. And he said, hopefully in 9 to 12 months, we'll make your position full-time sports, but for right now, it's weekend sports. And so I do the sports on the weekend, and during the week, I would be a news photographer, go car accidents, city council meetings. I mean, it was the worst, but it was my job. But it was great because Lou Henson was the coach at Illinois. And Mike White was the football coach. And believe it or not, that was when the Bears were winning the Super Bowl. The Cubs were good. And the Cardinals were good in baseball. Mm-hmm. And we used to go to all of these things. So it was
it was
great.
You got to cover, yeah.
Oh, I mean, I used to go to afternoon baseball games in St. Louis when Whitey Herzog was the manager and Jack Clark was at first. And, they had Ozzie Smith at shortstop, and they had Vince Coleman, and they had Tommy Herr at second, and they had, it was great. And back then we used to freelance. So what happened is we'd go to I would go to St. Louis for a matinee game. And I'd interview a couple of players, and I'd put together a thing, and then you'd go home. When I mean go home, go back to your TV station, drive 2 hours, and you would edit a story. And then you'd drive to the airport, and you would ship your tape to ESPN. And then that night, I kid you not, or the next night, you'd be watching Chris Berman do SportsCenter. And you had no idea if they were going to use your work or not. Mm-hmm. And Chris Berman goes, and the St. Louis Cardinals are off to a great start. And for more on that, here's Grant Napear. That's how they would do it. And they would pay you $150 if they used your work. And I would give $75 to my photographer, and I would keep the other $75. And so that's how you would make extra money. But it was such a thrill to be in Decatur, Illinois, and turn on Chris Berman and Bob Lee anchoring the SportsCenter. And when you heard them say your name, it was just like such a thrill. Wow. And now for more on that, here's Grant Napear. And they would run your story that you would say. Yeah. But, we talk about how to get started back then and all of the experience that I got working in Decatur, Illinois. It was fascinating.
Well, and too, at that time, did you even dream of, obviously had dreams, where you could get, into a big market and a more...
You always dream, but you also know how unbelievably competitive it is.
Yeah.
And I got another huge break. I was in Decatur for 3 years, and I took off 4th of July weekend to attend a friend's wedding. And he said, you need to come to my wedding because there's going to be a TV guy there, and I'm going to tell him to talk to you. So I go to this wedding, and this guy comes right up to me, and he goes, hey, you're Grant Napear. I said, yes. He goes, I'm Barry Baker. I'm the vice president of Coppola Communications. Hey, we have an opening in Sacramento. Send your tape out there and tell them that I told you to send it. Because they had owned a station in St. Louis, Channel 11. They aired back then when I was in that part of the country. They were the home of the St. Louis Cardinals and the St. Louis Blues hockey. Mm-hmm. So I send my tape out, and 3 days later, I get a call from Christine Kraft. Mm-hmm. And I fly out to Sacramento for an interview, and I accept the job right there on the spot for $25,000 to be the sports director at Channel 31 in July of 1987. Okay?
Yep.
And I'm just so excited. I'm like, wow, there is a God. I am going to California from Decatur, Illinois. Yes, there truly is a God. If you don't believe in God, trust me, there is one. You know, like I'm going, I mean, like, you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. I felt the same way.
Right. And so I could not have been happier. And so I was just getting ready to start my week vacation in Decatur. And I go back to Dick Westbrook. I go, Dick, I'm leaving. And he goes, Grant, I'm so happy for you. It's such a great opportunity. I said, Dick, here's my 2 weeks notice. He goes, listen, he goes, you got a vacation. You haven't taken any sick days. Why don't you just work the rest of the week? We'll pay you for that. And if you want to, and I said, so I literally worked Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And I got in my car Friday night and I drove all the way to Cal 3 days. Mm-hmm. No air conditioning in the middle of the biggest heat wave of the summer. And I get to Decatur, Illinois, I get to Sacramento on a Sunday night, and it's 109 degrees, and they put us up at the old Wood Lake.
Oh, yeah.
Right across the street from 31. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting outside, having an early outside. I'm the only one sitting outside. I mean, it's too hot to sit outside. Not me. I got palm trees around me. I got water. You know how fascinating it is when you see a palm tree for the first time.
Well, until and getting used to the Midwest, I always remember that. My first year or so, I'd be jogging 95 degrees. But there's no humidity. Now I die on the spot.
But I got to tell you, I'll never forget being at the Wood Lake around the palm trees and just thinking that I had just literally ended up in heaven. Like that was. I'll never forget sitting out there that night. And then so I started doing I was the sports director, and this is such a funny, well, maybe it's funny might not be the right word, interesting. I walked into the news director, the general manager's office, December 20, it was either the 23rd or 24th, 1987, to wish the general manager, whose name was Bill Walsh, not the former football coach, but to wish him a happy holiday. And he's not in there. There's somebody else in there. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. He goes, no, come on in. And it was Elliot Trushinsky, who, of course, is now the general manager at Channel 3 in Sacramento. And he goes, no, come on in. He says, Bill doesn't work here anymore. And I'm like, stunned. Yeah. He says, I'm the new general manager. And we talked for like a half hour. And Elliot's just the best in the world. I mean, I love Elliot. Elliot is, I can't say enough great things about Elliot Trushinsky. And then we got to develop a pretty good friendship. And it must have been around March. He calls me into his office and he said, hey, have you ever done basketball before? I said, yeah, I've been doing basketball since I was second grade. He goes, no, come on. Have you ever announced basketball? I go, yeah, since I've been in second grade. And I explained to him, he goes, okay. He goes, listen, we're trying to get the Kings because they were on Channel 13 for the first 3 years.
Tom Curran did the years, yes. Uh-huh.
And my heart's starting to like, wow, this is now my dream. And he said, okay, well, he goes, so then another month goes by and he goes, okay, you're not going to believe this. We got the rights for the Kings. I'm going to see if they will okay you to do the games. Well, it was interesting because Joe Axelson was the general manager back then. And no one watched Channel 31. Like I could go out at night, no one even knew who I was after even a couple of months of doing the sports. Well, I had sent Joe a handwritten letter probably around the first of the year. Because I had come from Big Ten country, and you know what it was like back then. Sure. Bob Knight was at Indiana, Lou Henson. Yeah. You had Bill Frieder at Michigan. You had great players, and Illinois was great. And I was fascinated by the atmosphere. And so I sent Joe a handwritten letter back in January. And I had no idea we were going to get the Kings. I had no idea. I just said, hey, Joe, my name is Grant Napear. I'm the sports director at 31. I just am writing this to thank you because your staff has been unbelievably nice to me. And they've made me feel at home. And I put down at the end of the letter, I said, I really hope the fans in this market realize how lucky they are because I just came from, I put Champaign, I didn't put Decatur, where I was covering Illinois. And this is even greater than the atmosphere that I was just covering. So fast forward then to Elliot. He had to go get permission. And he calls me back. I'll never forget this. He calls me back in his office 2 weeks later. And he said, you are the new TV voice of the Sacramento Kings. Ooh. And I was just like, he said, Joe Axelson loves you. He's what he said to me. He goes, Joe Axelson said, you're great. He really loves you. And to this day, 32 years of announcing the Kings, to this day, I wonder if I had not written that letter to Joe, if I would have been approved to do the games. Because I don't know if Joe would have even known who I was because, again, nobody watched Channel 31.
Yeah, that's a great point, although knowing Joe, I think once you wrote the letter, I'll bet you anything he did, if it intrigued him, that, he made a point to turn to Channel 31 a little bit.
Well, we had done interviews with Joe. He was the GM back then. And, but, it was 3, 13, 10, and then me and Jim Crandall. So, I don't, Joe, you knew Joe inside and out a lot better than I did. But I always tell students, again, go outside the box if you want a job. Go above and beyond. And, the one thing, and this, the one thing that goes a long way in life is thank you. Mm-hmm. And if you are sincere with your appreciation for what someone's doing for you, that just goes such a long way. You don't even think about how simple that is, but what a huge difference that makes.
I was going to say, I always tell people too. Like in coaching, I always say, looking back, doing volunteer work for Cotton Fitzsimmons with the Atlanta Hawks when I was in Georgia, Phil Johnson in Kansas City when I was a college coach, just being available. You need extra help, in those days they did. I was glad to do it, but a lot of guys wouldn't.
No, you're right. A lot of guys wouldn't. And you are, I've listened to your stories, which are fascinating about how you got to the point that you're at. And, I always wonder in my life, like, had I not taken off that weekend to go to that wedding, I would have never known about the opening in Sacramento. Had I messed up on national TV on Mislu, the sports director, Jim Tishy in Toledo, would have never come up to me and talked to me about filling in on the weekends. If I had not gone out to the California Bowl on my own expense, which was my dad's expense, I would have never gotten the opportunity to do that. So I look at the things in my life, starting with the national TV on Mislu, which led to filling in on the weekends in Toledo, Ohio, which led to my first full-time job in Decatur, taking the weekend off, which enabled me to find out about the job in Sacramento. And I end up at the station that ends up getting the Kings 8 months after I get there.
Yeah, but
it's fascinating.
It is. And all that obviously played a role, but you were prepared.
I was
number
prepared.
one, and you did, you did go the extra mile. Now I always said, I'm convinced that maybe it wouldn't happen as quick,
right?
Or as that to me, that's probably the only difference. A few things, had to fall in place for you. But I always kind of like tell young people, I said, before they're always thinking, I want to be vice president with a corner office. It's like, well, you kind of gotta do a few things before you get that corner office.
Yes.
And you may be prepared for it for years before you get it, but you'll have to be prepared.
Yes. Well, there was a book. I used to go talk to colleges and high schools all the time, and there was a book that Warner Wolf, he was a longtime sports anchor in both New York and Washington, did Monday Night Baseball for a while, and he wrote a book, and he has a paragraph, and I'm going to paraphrase his paragraph. And I'll remember it. It's maybe the best paragraph I've ever read of any book in my life about what I do. And he said, how some people say, if you can start at the top, start at the top? Not in this business. You need to get a job at 6 a.m. when nobody's listening to you. You need to be in a small market where you are allowed to make mistakes. And if you make a mistake, you're not going to lose your job. That's how you make it in this business. And it's so true, because when I got my first job out of college at the same station I did an internship for, WKIQ in Bowling Green, I was the morning DJ. I was an account executive, so I would go out and sell, get advertising during the day. And at night, I would announce games, whether it was hockey or basketball. And I'll never forget being the morning DJ. 3 times a week, we had the funeral report brought to you by Klotz Flowers. And I would have to literally go, well, it's now time for the funeral report brought to you by Klotz Flowers on East Worcester Street. And I would have to read the obituaries, seriously, 3 times a week. And I think back, sitting in that studio, and you know what it's like in the Midwest trying to get anywhere, getting up in the morning and fighting that 15 below zero weather and going in there and turning all the equipment on and, doing those things.
Yeah.
It's just, I look back at my career and I'm just like, you know me, I don't talk about myself that much, but like, no matter what anyone says to me, like, and you and I have been so blessed to do what we do.
Absolutely.
But I've earned every single bit of this. Like, I paid my dues.
Oh,
like, even though I started doing this at an early age, which I was lucky to do NBA basketball at 28, like, I rolled up my sleeves. I did all the hard work. Like, I deep down feel that everything I've achieved in my career, I've earned.
Yeah, I've always kind of felt the same way. I remember, I haven't forgotten driving vans, 5, 6 hours, for games and taking the uniforms home for my wife to wash, cleaning cleaning off the floor and painting locker rooms and getting gyms ready for games, and
making nothing
and making nothing.
Right.
Speaking at anytime they get 5 people together trying to raise $10,
Sure.
that sort of thing.
It's incredible, isn't it?
I mean, you. In my mind, it's a little bit like yourself. I don't never really thought necessarily about being in the NBA, but I felt I deserve a chance at a top Division I job. I've done enough to do that.
Sure. And you're so simple. And I believe it or not, I'm really simple. The one thing I've always admired about you, you don't need to live in a big fancy house or drive a big fancy car or have great clothes. You don't care about that stuff. And my dad was like that. My dad never, ever, ever spent money on cars or clothes or anything. He spent money on us, and he spent money on his children, or he spent money on, things that we would love to do, like this, going to the games.
Yeah.
Like my dad would much rather take his boys to watch the Giants and Jets play every Sunday than drive around in a nice car.
Yeah.
Like that's what was important to him.
I think I was raised a lot the same way. I mean, we'd go to AAA baseball games in Annapolis or Louisville, and occasionally we'd go to a major league game. But of course, my dad always remembered my first job I ever had, working on a golf course at a resort in French Lick, and I'd come home, bitching about, geez, I got to rake sand traps, and they're paying me $6 an hour. And he said, boy, let me tell you something. They're paying you $6 an hour. You give them $7 a day's worth.
That's beautiful.
And he said, and he said, and that was kind of always stuck with me.
That's great. I'll tell you, I love that. It's funny. Last year, I told Elliot when he paid me to do the Kings games, I said, you're very successful. I said, but that was the worst business decision you've ever made. He goes, how's that? I go, well, you paid me $300 a game to do the Kings, but what you didn't realize, I would have paid you $300 to do the games for every game,
I always remember, too, going back, of course, we worked together a long time, but I always remember, I think the first time I remember you, it was probably the lowest time of my life. At that time, we were in Hawaii.
Oh, boy.
In a camp.
Oh, boy.
And just... everybody hurt. We had no talent, and I mean, I knew, this can't work.
There's the most miserable I've ever seen you.
Yeah, and it's like I'm by nature a positive person.
You weren't that day.
But I mean, and I.
That's the only time in my life people always ask me, that's the only time that I've seen you like that. Like you were almost defeated. Your face and the way you were, there was no humor about you. There was no joking. And I didn't know you very well back then, but it was apparent that you knew you were in an absolutely impossible situation.
Yeah, we'd lost Ricky Berry to suicide a few months before. I mean, it just all piled up, and I always remember my wife, we'd talk, and she'd, oh, honey, you'll figure it out. You'll find a way to make it work. I said,
Not this one.
No, I won't. I mean, just saying that really
I'll never forget.
Tough.
I got there like a day or two after the team arrived, and I walked into the gym. I'll never forget this. Danny Ainge comes running up to me, literally off the practice floor. I'm like, you're not going to believe this. Ralph can't run.
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you talking about? Bill Russell had traded for Ralph Sampson without even looking at him, know? And he goes, Ralph can't run. I go, what do you mean he can't run? He can't run. And I look over, and you have Vinny Del Negro's got his Juwan Oldham. You have literally half your team is already unable to practice because of injuries. And it's the second, or whatever. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I'll never forget going to the Blaisdell Center, and here's Jerry, and he's got a lineup of 3 CBA players going against Magic, Worthy, Kareem. And I'm just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, that was. That was
the only good part about that is we were in Hawaii, but I don't even think you appreciated that.
Oh no, I'd rather been in Bakersfield as far as I'm concerned. I was talk about misery. Anyway, that was, and then I want to talk a little bit about our time together. I was going to say it was one of the things that always struck me, and you kind of touched on it. People always ask me, when you work with Grant, like with do you guys does he do a lot of preparation. I said, he doesn't have to. I said, I'll tell you about Grant right now. I said, whether it's opens or commercials, I mean, he gets it right the first time, every time. And I said, he can do it while watching a Giants football game. and he doesn't miss a beat. I said, I don't, honest to God, I don't think there's a person in America that can do that.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying he should, but
yeah, I don't recommend announcing a live sporting event while watching a sporting event on your phone. It's probably not the best recipe for success. But you know me, I
you
can't
can do it.
Well, first of all, not only can I do it, I have to.
You
do
have
it.
to.
Right.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah. No, I have no doubt. I mean, that's not even a question. That is that's mandatory. But just
we had truly such great times, and you know how I feel. I'm so happy that you're still doing some games because it's people always you get asked this all the time. I get asked this all the time. I get asked, working with Jerry, and it got to a point where I always know what you're going to say, and you always know what I'm going to say. I know when you're going to say it. I know when to lead you into things, and we had the best time. And oh yeah, by the way, most of the years that you and I worked together, our team was terrible.
Yeah.
So we had to get through the telecast and keep our audience, and I think we did a great job of that. I think we literally had people watching games in the fourth quarter because they wanted to hear, gee, what's Jerry going to say? We would have humor over. Think about all the lean years that you and I did games for.
Oh boy, it was tough. It was, as you know, it got really tough. And but I thought too, I thought that we got to the point too where I think. I know when we started, I thought both of us, we probably criticized officials too much.
I was very guilty of that.
I know I was. And
I was too.
It really serves no purpose.
Totally agree.
The thing I always tell people, I said, at the end of it, we've talked about this, the best teams win the most games.
Yep.
And calls will go against you and they'll go for you.
Yep.
And, all that. But I think we got to the point to where I thought we did a pretty good job of, just being giving credit to the other team.
Yes,
objective. I love the game like you do, and
yes.
I was like, well, I want the Kings to be the fun team.
And everybody knows that we were rooting for the Kings.
But
yes,
but if the other team is really playing good, give them credit.
Yep.
And they've got outstanding players.
One of the neatest validations that I've received over the years, and I know you have too, because you've been standing next to me, is when an official comes up and says, "Hey, I just want to let you know how much we appreciate and respect the job that you do." Yeah. And they said, you're always fair to us. And it doesn't mean that you're not critical, but you're critical when we need to be criticized, but you're not afraid to say you were wrong. And there are too many announcers that will criticize an official, and then the replay will show that the official was right, and the announcers don't say, man, that's my bad, I was wrong on that. Yeah. And I'll tell you, even to this day, I have officials, and when we go to the NBA broadcast meetings in the summer, I always have a couple of officials come up to me and thank me for that. And when you and I were doing the games, it happened on a regular basis. And I like that because, I think a lot of people forget. Coaches, players, referees, broadcasters, we're all trying to accomplish the same goal. And that's to make the league great, right?
Right.
And we all have different roles, but we are all really under one umbrella. And I was critical of the officials when I started doing the games, and so were you.
Yes.
And I learned that, first of all, I was wrong most of the time, and second of all, I put myself in the shoes of the viewer. I don't want to listen to an announcer rip the officials all game. And when I used to listen to other announcers, it turned me off. So I stopped doing that.
Yeah, no, that thing I noticed just from watching other broadcasts how much they do it. It just takes, and like I say, I fully understand that it's impossible to call a basketball game flawless.
Can't. And it's impossible to announce a game flawlessly.
Yeah, I've always said, it bothers me a little bit. We've talked about this where players will go up to, bitching all the time, which overdoing it. But I said, how would they like it if they miss a layup and the referee runs up to them and says, Jesus, what did you do? Miss that layup, Same thing.
It's the same thing.
Come on, just have respect for the profession.
But, again, with everything being under a microscope these days, because of social media, and everything is instantaneous, more than ever, I think that, and I get this sense when I go to the league meetings and we're all under one roof with the commissioner and everyone else. We're all in this together. We all benefit if the league's doing great. Okay? When the
Yes.
league's not doing great, like baseball right now, there's a domino effect. And then all of a sudden, it's what's wrong with this sport. And it's not. I love being a part of the NBA because it's still such a strong league. Does it have some issues? Yeah, every sports league does.
Every sport does.
You know, the issue in China right now is a big issue, and there's others. But for the most part, you have a commissioner who I think's done a marvelous job. And the thing about the NBA, as you well know, they're always thinking ahead. They don't think that everything's great and everything's hunky-dory and they don't have to fix. They're always trying to tinker with the game. Not always for the best. You would admit that.
No.
But they're not afraid to try. They're not afraid to experiment. They're not, like, even right now with their thinking of the proposal of having a mid-season tournament, which I'm not necessarily crazy about, but I like the idea of the playoff format that they're talking about.
I do like, some of their ideas. I don't really like the mid-season thing much. I'm just not sure about that, but I like the idea of maybe play-ins.
Yeah, I think that would be exciting.
And certainly, I'm really be in favor of just the 16 best teams being seeded and move on. I think with charter flights like they are, sure, there'd be some issues, but last time I checked, nobody's playing back-to-back in the playoffs.
No, that's right.
And I mean, it's same for both teams,
And you could change it where you would do a 2-3-2 format. So if you had a West Coast team playing an East Coast team in the first round, you wouldn't, if it went 7-2-2-1-1-1, you'd go 2-3-2.
Yeah.
So so we'll see. But again, I go back to what you brought up about working with you and how many great we had so many phenomenal moments. I always tell people the greatest line, I'll never forget, we were sitting on the bench in San Antonio about 15 minutes before TV, and it was the final week of the season. And you go, you know what's the most important part of our job, don't you? And I go, what's that? And you go, to convince people that they're not seeing what they're actually seeing. I just thought,
I was going to say.
I go, is there a better line? To convince people that they're not seeing what they're actually seeing.
Yeah,
that's the greatest thing I've ever heard.
I was going to say, when you're rolling along with 23-win season about that time, and it's like I say, it was. I always said too, it's always a case. It's like even with those bad teams, well, you can. Okay, the team's bad. Boy, Kevin Martin's really scoring well.
Yeah.
Or Francisco Garcia's got a lot of potential. That sort of thing. You can always find something without taking away from the obvious of it.
I know this is your show, but I want to ask you a question because every place I go to, I have people come up to me and ask me how you're doing and please say hello to Jerry. Do you miss even some of the travel? Do you miss some of that camaraderie that you get with individuals that you've known for 30 and 40 years on the road that now you don't get a chance to have because you're not traveling?
Yes, I do. I mean, really, that's the part you miss, and even, with doing the pre and post game, I really don't have the time just due to the different times to really visit with a lot of those people. So, yeah, I miss that. I think that's probably the thing I worry about maybe the most when it's time to totally get out, But
I think that our job, the one thing it does, it really keeps you young at heart because you're always laughing.
Oh yeah.
There's just no substitute with being around the guys, regardless of whether it's the players on your team or the coaches or the colleagues that we have, or I know the favorite thing for you was always to sit on the bench before the game talking with another member of another organization or a scout or whatever, and you would just sit there and talk for 30 minutes. And those are the things that, to me, I'll miss the most when it comes time to not do the games. That's like maybe the best part of our job.
Oh, I think so, really. I mean, and people that are in the same line of work and they understand, and you have that you develop a trust factor with, that you can talk to them about maybe some issues you wouldn't, and they'll honor that, And I mean,
well, you know who you can trust and who you can't after a while in this league.
Yeah, the other thing I've always said too is those broadcasters, when the team wasn't doing well, a lot of them. But I always said the thing that we had a great team. It was a broadcast team.
That's right.
And so we, it's a little different. You have your own little niche there.
That's right.
And just could really enjoy all the people.
We were lucky.
Very lucky.
Right. And you know what else we were lucky about? We didn't have interference from management in terms of the way you and I did the games, because we weren't afraid to be critical of the team and we weren't afraid to praise the other team. I know a lot of announcers in the league, and I won't mention their names, that have come up to me and said, boy, I watch your games and I wish I could announce the games the way you do, but we're not allowed to.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that probably happens a lot more
Right.
than we realize.
Sure.
So it's very fortunate, and like I say, I think in today's situation, when you have a Vlade Divac, running the franchise, I mean, in a sense, one of the more obviously likable people that's ever
Top
played
shelf.
for the Kings,
Yep.
and then I think Coach Walton's really's got an easy presence
Incredible.
about him, so that makes everything better. And
Sure
I
does.
mean, I won't go get into names, but there's been a couple of coaches in the past that were very difficult to be around.
Sure.
And didn't really want to be around them.
Yeah.
And makes the job a little harder. But when
Yeah.
you have your own team, it's all still doable.
I haven't really sat down. I know you did when you wrote your book and everything, and I'll do this one time, but like I'd have to write down on paper all of the coaching staffs that I've been through since 1988. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
How many, and back then, as you know, there was one head coach and one assistant
Yeah,
coach.
it
Now there are more coaches than players.
It's just hard to keep track, and all the. No, it's really changed,
Yeah.
and I'm glad to see a lot of people get work. But I don't know
Yeah.
that it's
I know.
all necessary. But I do think looking back, some of the guys that I probably feel closest to, and maybe a little sorry for when they lose jobs as assistant coaches.
Yeah.
Because I know they don't make as much and they don't get as much credit.
Yeah.
And I've been there, and so I think you see that a little bit.
Yeah, I think the biggest, people always ask me, what's the biggest change from when I started doing? The biggest change is that now every single word that you say is dissected. It is out there for the whole world to see within seconds of when you say it. And you have to be so careful not to say the wrong thing, to offend anyone, discriminate. I've always made a pretty simple rule when I'm doing my radio show, because it's so spontaneous and it's so at times inflammatory, and at times the debate can get out of hand. Stay away from race, sex, stay away from all of those areas now, which are just throwing gasoline on a hot fire.
Yeah, that you can't
Right.
win.
You just can't. And and I don't mind saying this here. It has really bothered me to see some of my colleagues in the NBA lose their jobs over one sentence that was so innocent to them and had no, not even the slightest hint of discrimination from what they intended it to be, and they end up losing their job.
Yeah,
over it.
you think there'd be a little more understanding.
It's just so sad.
Why should this cost a guy
I know.
his livelihood?
Right.
It's a mistake.
Right, like Tim Ryan of the 49ers, his radio analyst, got suspended for the New Orleans game because of a remark he made about Lamar Jackson and the football against the dark uniform and his dark skin. You know what? They didn't fire him. They said, okay, you know what? We're going to suspend you for a game.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, regardless of what you believe in or don't believe in, that was the right way to handle that.
Yeah.
But some other announcers that have lost their jobs, so going back, I don't want to get off on a tangent here. I have a microphone in front of me every day on my radio show and TV. And when you stop working, I told Doug, I go, Doug, I'm going to give you a little bit of, I'm going to help you out here. And I'm going to tell you, you can do whatever you want, whatever, but I'm going to tell you right now, these are the areas that you would be better staying away from if you want longevity and you want everyone to love you.
Yeah.
And I go, when I mean love you, I know a lot of people don't like the way I do my radio show, but as long as they're listening, but they don't, it's not because I'm saying something that would discriminate religion, ethnicity, sex, or whatever.
Yeah, it's different opinion.
Yeah, exactly, and I'm okay with that. So I told Doug, and when we were going through a couple of delicate social issues in Sacramento early in his tenure with me doing the radio show, I go, Doug, you have a microphone in front of you. I'm not going to tell you what to say or what not to say, but I'm going to just give you a little advice before we start the show. If you get into this, you'll never get out of it. Mm-hmm. And it won't go away. So you can handle it however you want, and you are entitled to your opinion, and no one's ever going to tell you that you're not. But understand that everything that you say has consequences, even consequences that you are right now thinking about. Because all it takes are an individual or individuals to get together, and then you have the political correctness and everything else that's in play. So I have no problem saying this right here because I've said it on my radio show. we unfortunately live in such a sensitive society now that what could have been perceived as just an innocent, funny joke even 5 years ago now can cost someone their job.
Well, not, too. And we said like the great comedians that almost none of them work college campuses.
How about that?
Which
That's
tells
right.
you a lot.
That does tell you a lot.
You thought that would have been impossible.
I know.
20, 30 years ago.
But listen, so you and I have been through a lot, and I'm grateful that we're able to chat and reminisce, because the one thing that's changed is the fact that technology has changed, and you and I started doing this when we were traveling commercial, and we'd get a 4 a.m. wake-up call and all of that. But the one thing that hasn't changed are the great people that are in our profession.
Oh, they're great. I mean, really.
And all the stories and all of because, we're all in a kind of a fraternity. Like when you talk to Larry Bird, you don't see Larry Bird all the time, but you guys have had the same life in terms of all of the people you've met and all of the travel and everything else. And, we're almost like in the basketball bubble. And that never burst. And that's the thing I've loved the most about doing all the games on TV.
I think with pretty much everybody in the kind of that, like you say, the kind of the professional bubble, you haven't exactly walked down the same road they've been on, but you know where it is. You know where it is. It's pretty. It's kind of similar in a lot of ways. And so I think that one thing I wanted to touch before we go is that. I of course enjoyed working with you so much, and people always say, "Do you miss?" I said, "Sure, I do. That's the most fun. It's doing games is fun. The pre and post game's a little different." Right. But I said the thing that does bother me is things don't come to me as quick as they once did. Used to be. I didn't have to prepare. I knew everybody, and it's gotten tougher. And as a senior citizen, you have to deal with that a little bit. And I know that it's kind of the thing I can't do forever, and I don't want to be, kind of like Johnny Most. Well, the big left-hander over to number 47.
Yeah. Well, that's why I have so much respect for Gary Gerald, because I think he's 77 now. Yeah. And radio play-by-play is so spontaneous, and it's so. I don't know if I could do that when I'm that age. I hope I can, but it's just part of life.
I don't believe he's missed a beat.
But, so the Vince Scully's of the world and those. I'm fascinated by that, because it's the unknown. You now are in your mid 70s, where I don't know what it's going to be like for me. Everyone's different. I hope I'm like you, where I'm your age and I'm still part of the organization. Because I got to tell you, like if they took the organization away from me, it would be taking away a big part of my life.
Oh, no question. It definitely. With the energy you have and all that. Really, no. I get that. Because you just don't know. You got to have a void, something to fill a void there. There's no doubt.
You have to. And people that that don't do what we do don't quite understand. But I probably, know you. You're like a part of my family, and the people that the Pete Youngmans of the world and all of those, they're really a part of our family. And that's all I've known my entire adult life, pretty much. And so you have your own family with your wife and your kids then grow up and they leave, and it's your wife but you're with your basketball family more than you're with your own family. And I don't know if people fully realize how much of, like, people always say, well, gee, you're too much of a homer, or, you shouldn't be. Well, wait a minute. I live with this family. There's no way you can't have it both ways. You can't do what we do every day and live with this team every day and then say, I'm going to be 100% objective, and I'm not going to be a homer, and I'm not going to really root for the. That's not humanly possible.
Well, no, and I've made it clear. I am a homer. Okay, I am for the Sacramento Kings.
Right.
Now I try to be fair, but I'll never.
I don't either.
Deny. There's come on. Why would I want to do it? And that's it. But hey, I know you've got other things to do, and that's the other amazing things about this guy. He's going to be on radio now pretty soon. Yeah. 4 straight hours. I always remember when you did it by yourself.
Sure.
The
one thing, like, I'll give you an example. Later in December, I'm doing a Sacramento Kings game on a Saturday night against Phoenix, and then Sunday night I'm in Denver. And then Monday morning, I'm doing the Jim Rome show down in Southern California. And I used to do arena football, and there were times we'd be doing a game in LA, and I'd have to get on a red eye to get an arena game in New York on the next day, and then meet you in Portland the next night.
Yeah.
And I've always wanted to do that my whole life. I always used to grow up, and when I used to see the network sports announcers in New York on this day and 2 days later in LA, I was like, man, I want to do that. And you know how much I love flying. Like, travel and flying is my passion. And unlike you, I can be on an airplane every day. And so for me, like, I get invigorated, and I like if you told me, okay, Napes, I need you to do a basketball game in LA on Sunday. I need you to do a hockey game in New York on Monday, a basketball game in Portland Tuesday, and then another hockey game in Chicago on Wednesday. I would be so excited. Like, for me, that's the ultimate achievement. I don't need to do the Super Bowl. I don't need to do, I just love doing games in one city one night, the next city the next night, fly all night, because it's a challenge for me. And I know you think that's crazy, but that makes me go. That makes me tick.
Now, and that's a great one to end on, because that is Grant Napear. I'm serious now. That is Grant Napear, one in a zillion. And my goodness, I mean, you tell me. So when you desire, you young people out there, to be a play-by-play, just keep that in mind now. That's what it takes. So anyway, it's just been great having you. And
anytime, I enjoyed it.
You know, I tell you what, and obviously, you know, I don't think we've ever had a bad day.
We've never had a bad day, other than that one day at the gym in Hawaii. You've never had a bad day.
Yeah. That was a bad month. Yeah. But anyway, so thanks for coming.
My pleasure. Let's do it again down the road.
Let's do. So again, and just keep doing what you're doing.
Every day, just wake up, and as you said, every day is a good day if you wake up, right?
Every day is a good day if you wake up.